Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Durham District School Board's Education Finance Committee meeting, public meeting of March 30th. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And I'm going to do the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school boards and schools are located. Today, this area is a home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Islands First Nations, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Before we go on, I have regrets from trustees Barrett, Lindquist, and Forbes. First, do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Hearing and seeing none. Can I have somebody to approve the agenda? Trustee Thatcher. I'm going to anybody opposed. Hearing and seeing none, the agenda is approved as distributed. Next is our approval of the June 9th, 2021 Education Finance Committee public meeting minutes. And are there any errors or omissions, if we can all remember back that far? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of June 9th, 2021? And let's see, somebody raised their hand, somebody different. Okay, sorry, Trustee Morton. All right, and anybody's opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes are approved as distributed. Moving on to item number 6, which is the public deputizations. We have Tara Cully here from SEAC. Tara, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, thank you for having me. Appreciate that. Did everyone have a copy? I think I sent an electronic version of the slide deck that I'm going through. Am I presenting it on share screen, or is everyone okay to follow along?
Could we present it, please?
Okay, give me 2 seconds. Do that. Oops. Let me grab that deck. Oops. Sorry, I'm dealing with multiple monitors here, and it's having fun trying to get these to go here. Oh my goodness. Technical difficulties.
No problem, Tara.
All right, sorry, just trying to get this, make sure that I've got it in the right spot here. When you're dealing with 2 computers, it gets a little dicey. All right, oops, there we go. Send that there. Oops. And everyone's watching me struggle. Hi. All right. Excuse me. And come on.
Chair
Having trouble there. Sorry, everyone. Do you want me to keep going, and then we can and everyone can follow along then?
Sure. I'm sorry, Nora.
That's okay, Chair Edwards. I just wondered, Associate Director Wright, would it be possible for one of the staff perhaps to do the sharing, and we can
Yes.
along when we hear we need to?
Yes, Andrea, you have it open? That would be lovely if you could do that. Thank you very much. I owe you a cookie. Thank you. Much appreciated. Okay. Hi, after our technical difficulties, everyone, please don't hold that against me. I am Tara Cully. I am the Durham Down Syndrome Association rep sitting on our SEAC, and I am here on behalf of SEAC to speak to you today about our about the process. If we want to go to the next slide, Andrea, please. So as of the writing of this presentation, we did not really have the numbers. I understand that a bunch of our numbers finally came out this morning. We can speak to a couple points really quickly, but at this point in time, we did not, as a SEAC, as a group, actually have the time to be able to review those numbers and provide any real fulsome feedback on that. So really what you're going to be seeing is what we had already had concerns about and things we wanted to highlight and sort of stress the importance that we do continue to fund and support, and that we'll see in the following slides. I do believe that there is another opportunity in the budget process that we have this year that we can then come back through the process, and we'll provide a little bit more feedback with our specifics on that. So that's our intent to do that. Okay. Next slide, please, Andrea. All right, so for that, so really just sort of provided it sort of in a couple of concerns overall to sort of keep in mind things that we're going to have our stressors and things that are going to sort of further exacerbate the situation that we find ourselves in. So physical safety and our mental health impacts. Again, most of our students are very susceptible, and we have to take those utmost precautions to ensure their safety and well-being. And with the hospital numbers starting to increase yet again, I'm not sure anyone's surprised, given it's a little couple weeks after March break. It's really imperative that we have to continue to provide those safe environments for our students and staff for in-person learning, but also be able to support the families that still choose to remain with remote learning for many various and sundry health and safety reasons that they need in order to keep their families safe. But we also have to make sure that mental health stays top of mind. So we've seen the numbers coming out that the impacts that we've had over the past 2 years for staff and students has really sort of highlighted the amount of the detrimental effect that we've had, that this pandemic has had on, and it continues to have on our staff and our students, and we have to be able to support them. The other item as well is concerns on the latest PPM that's come out, PPM 81, provision of health support services in the school settings. I know that we've spoken as a board to the Ministry of Health and expressed our concerns about it and all, but we'd like to further emphasize a lot of those issues, the disruption to our staff and our students with those transitions of services, not understanding who can come in where and when and why, understanding what that availability of our support resources is actually going to be if we're now have to provide those support resources, and as well as the appropriate space within the schools to actually deliver those services. You know, are we adequately, set up for those scenarios? And what is that going to take in order for us to make sure that we have those appropriate places? And then as well, maintaining our confidentiality and the dignity of our students, where they've got to actually leave class to go and access those services and then kind of come back to class after that. How are we going to make sure that we maintain that level of confidentiality and make sure that children don't feel ostracized because they've got to go have a medical support issue, those sorts of things. Next slide, please, Andrea. So really for recommendations, I don't think anyone's really surprised. Staffing, really we need to make sure that the students are supported. We always seem to be continuing to do more with less. I understand our latest numbers this morning, we're expecting about a 1.2% increase for special education funding, but the salary obligations that we have is about 1%. So the overall increase is fairly negligible in terms of what additional funding we're getting. And we're seeing an increase in the past couple of years of our actual enrollment. So again, we're sort of looking, is that really allowing us to, fund and support our students? SIP increases, it was, I think, barely able to cover the salary increases for staffing, which is our especially high needs students that need 2 or more full-time staff just to attend school. Just having a salary increase alone, that the increase in that SIP claim didn't even cover any additional cost increases on top of that to provide additional supporting. So really on top of that, shortages in our EAs, really leaving our students sort of in the lurch. Really the intention of an EA, it's called an educational assistant, is to provide our learning supports for our students. But in a lot of cases with those supports, they are actually spending their time managing safety concerns for students. And that really leaves a deficit in the areas of any of our students that just that is not the appropriate word, but have a learning or developmental disability. They're really not getting the support necessary in order to achieve their potential in those regards. We really need to focus on being able to, can we support all of our students in those areas and not just for safety. We need to extend that back to our attendants. We've also heard clinical assessments for our students, that there's a large gap, large wait lists, delays are happening. We're here that parents are still being told that clinical assessments are not even being done until grade 4. And that really eliminates our ability that any gains that we could get with an early intervention with students in kindergarten or grade 1 even, that really eliminates those gains that they could be getting if we had those assessments done and put the appropriate resources and accommodations in place to make them successful. So we really need to increase that staff to make sure that we can get those wait times down so that we can get to that critical early intervention for our students. Next slide, Andrea. So really, those are sort of our big pieces there. Just wanted to sort of highlight, we do and we continue to advise the board and our trustees, as well as provide information and guidance on budgetary matters affecting our programs and services. We're continuing to work with all of our members and work with all of the organizations that we are parts of and that make up our SEAC. And we're trying to lobby the government to affect our positive change, to influence and be able to provide the supports that we need for our students, and make sure that we're always there to advocate on behalf of our students and make sure that both parents, staff, and students felt that they're being heard and that we can always work together and keep going and make all of our children's school careers as successful as they can be. Next slide, please, Andrew. So really, thank you. We really just want to say thank you. We know how hard that it is to balance this budget and find solutions to those things. The DDSB has had a long-standing run, and we've been great supporters of our students. And SEAC, we're grateful that you've always found the ways to provide our additional funding above and beyond our initial envelopes, and to give our highest need students the chance to succeed. So we look forward to continuing to work with you in the months and the years ahead. And hopefully in a few short weeks, we'll come back again to that. I'd just like to call out, these are all of the current associations and folks that sit on SEAC right now. You can see the vast and many lenses that we bring to the table. So we just wanted to at least give you a little bit of an insight into, there's a lot of voices around the table, a lot of really great, passionate people there that are here to help and keep make our students' lives, especially at school and beyond, as successful and as positive as possible. And that is it. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay, I have a question from Linda.
Thank you, Donna. Hi, Tara. That was a great presentation. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
You talked about EAs being more busy with safety concerns for students. I'm just wondering, and I don't want to put you on the spot, I'm just wondering if you could give me a couple of examples of what that would be. And then did you say that your wish would be that there could be more healthcare professionals in the schools in order to deal with those safety concerns so that it frees up the EAs more? Could you just talk about that a little bit for me, Tara?
So I can give you some examples. I can draw from personal experience. in some of the classes, a class that one small class placement that my son was actually in at the time, there was a child that had anger and behavioral issues to the point where on multiple occurrences on a daily basis, classes were evacuated because the child was acting out and those sorts of things. So it became difficult for my son to learn because the students and the staff were very, rightly so, dealing with the moment and making sure that the students, and as well as the student that was having the challenge at the time, remained safe and that everyone else was there. But then that goes down to, and then you can come back to, so, well, then what about my child? My child today has been disrupted. They're now out in the hallway, they're else out into another thing. They're not learning anymore. My child actually developed an anxiety issue because he didn't want to go back into the class because he was afraid. So the supports that are not there, because now there's no additional supporting to say, okay, well, maybe we have to look at this differently. How does my child and the children who are not having the safety issues, how are they getting the support that they need? A child with a learning disability in the class that really just needs a resource to help work on dyslexia, for example, but there's children in the classroom that are flight risk. That student or that EA has to actually look after that child that's a flight risk rather than helping the child with dyslexia to help with their learning disability and work through their accommodations to make sure that they're successful in their career. Just anecdotal, but those are the sorts of things that we're looking at and we're hearing are happening, and it's becoming more of a challenge that a lot of students are getting sort of unsupported or in the manner in which they need to be supported, especially in the mainstream where you have so many children in a classroom versus whether you're in a small class where you do have dedicated staff inside the class, but it happens in both areas as well. Does that answer your question?
Thanks, Tara. That was excellent. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And I have Trustee Crawford.
Now, I just wanted to follow up on that because we've been keeping stats for many years on incidents, and you just described a single incident, but there's many more than that. I'm wondering, as far as funding goes, the government is the one that insists that these stats go in, so they must have a pretty good idea of how it's disrupting class. And we and they are saying that the children that are having the problem should stay in the classroom. They should be funding that and giving us a separate envelope for safety, or are they giving us a separate envelope for safety and special needs?
I will let you, maybe Associate Director David Wright can talk about the safety funds sort of thing from and so the envelopes for special education, and then I will probably Superintendent Macaulay will probably want to have a response as well.
With your indulgence, Madam Chair, I'd offer the first crack at Superintendent Macaulay. Thanks.
All right, Superintendent Macaulay.
Thank you, and thank you for the dialogue, because it always is a complex planning when it comes to our students, and really as a team and as a department too, we know that the people and the relationships matter. Getting the right staff role in terms of the background of the individuals with the kids matters, but really getting a good solid programming piece. So when we see recommendations come forward, Right to Read, the SDC committee, PPM 81, and where that will land, a foundation to all of those is really around universal design for learning and how we do early intervention. We build connections with kids, understand who they are, connect with the families, and really the big shift in education, which is really, really important, is centering the students rather than having the students respond to program that's been predetermined, and then how do they, so that more directed towards. So when we look at our staff, quite often we will draw to conversations that link to a particular staff group, such as our educational assistants and the incredible work that they do in our schools. But quite often too, we're having conversation around classroom support staff, because we've got a lot of roles in classrooms, the importance of the teachers. We have interpreters interveners for our kids who are deaf, blind, EAs, all working with kids. And then in that interconnect between our departments to look at how we program for kids and how we support them, and then how the family component comes into that. So it's really important too that to not go too narrow in terms of a finite one singular resource for our kids as we build that. So we do take a look at that, and we also look at support to classrooms. So Tara's spoken about her son in terms of his community of learners in his classroom. And really, so our support goes to not just the number of people, but it's really what the skills and knowledge and what the people are doing to support the kids in that community of learners. So always a bit of a tricky balance, but always centered on the kids, but really a conversation about one role in the system when we see kids with complexity of needs is how do we wrap all of those different layers of support in place and balance out within the budget in terms of that breadth of role that we have in the system. I think the other consideration in our district that we're quite proud of is that we do have a model. We want to make sure that we're doing like the least restrictive for our kids. The majority of our kids are in regular class placements and are supported. So it's kind of that all some few, but we're proud of the breadth of programming to meet the few that need that intensive support program as well in those low ratio classes. So there's no easy answer and no singular answer when we look at personalizing the experience for our kids and the staff that support them. And at the end of the day, there's a collective want and a collective effort across departments to really try and shape as positive of an experience in each day for both the students and then the staff that care so much about them. And again, that just brings us full circle back to the value that roles such as interpreters, interveners, and EAs play in their immense connections with kids. And just the funding model has changed over time. We did have, for those that have been around the table quite a while, we did have a model previous to our current model rate in terms of the 4 to 6 kids with LD and how that reshapes and rechanges. I think our current model gives us a bit more actual flexibility for principals to be able to move on a relationship building, a relationship perspective within their building to kind of ebb and move supports in their systems. But the roles are always interconnected, right? We can't really talk about one special education support without layering the others beside. And then Trustee Stone, to your comment around health supports and our supports, where the PPM 81 will go when it comes back out, because we knew it was draft. We gave consultation in a number of circles, including directors, superintendents of special education, and our union partners. We often talk, and the privilege of this portfolio is I work with kids that are funded by 4 different ministries when we talk about our ECPP programs. It's really important too that we each kind of stay in our pathway of what our primary mandate is. So if we go too deep in health, we can't actually do education really well, but we want to make sure that we're meeting the health needs of kids in how they access learning and well-being at school. But we really rely on our health partners to do health well. And we're in a really healthy system when each person in each system excels within their sector and how those sectors come together. So we want to be really careful where education and health start to intersect and work together, that it's a collaboration but not an overlap of duty, because our mandate under the Education Act for that learning and well-being piece, we really want to do that well. And we don't want, I kind of picture it as lanes in a swimming pool. We're all kind of in the pool and we're all in kind of the same goal of helping the students. But if we all start crossing lanes too much financially, then we're actually kicking up a bigger issue that gets kicked down the road to solve it a different way. So I have great respect for our health partners and the job that they do and how trying the last 2 years has been, mainly impacting our families. But it's really important that we all kind of keep going back to our original and purpose mandate and make sure that we're expending funding in our lane, because we want them to expend in theirs and do really well in theirs as it sits adjacent for the kids and families. So I hope that kind of gave a bit, but if I missed something, please kick it back.
Trustee Crawford, have you got your answer to most of that?
Safety is priority one, and that has to be funded. Am I hearing here that we're having classrooms that aren't safe and it's not getting sufficient funding?
Well, Paul, it really comes down to, yes, we have some envelopes, and Associate Director Wright can sort of follow up. But we have envelopes. We have envelopes for special education, which we already know that doesn't support the needs in our schools, and we always, as a board, we move funding around to support those, to additionally support students with special needs. There are funding for safety. It comes from several envelopes if you wish to support our children. We have mental health as well, etc. So, but overall, when it comes to supporting our needs, our student needs, you know that last year was over $4 million, 4.6 was it? Or 4.2, I can't remember, $1 million that we additionally spent on special education needs.
Okay, then, so we are funding it, but we're funding it from our own funds, so to speak. And are we reporting that shortfall to the government? Because they're the ones that are not funding it totally. So I'm just asking an accounting question here, is do those numbers go back to the government and say, we had to fund this by $4.6 million last year to keep our students safe, and therefore you owe us $4.6 million?
And I'll make one comment because I've been around for a long time, and then I'll pass it over to Associate Director Wright. But the comment that has always been made, and I remember I attended the one CAC session, training session that the Ministry of Education held, and they always have said that special education envelope is intended, yes, to spend for special education, but it's only one portion. It's up to the boards to basically determine the programming and the supports and fund them the way they see fit. So that's one comment they've always made. So, and then I'll pass it over to Associate Director Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be cautious about the conversation around student safety, specifically in relation to special education. I think that I just want to make sure we're talking about that in the right context. So if it's in context of keeping our students safe and supporting our students, then yes, on an annual basis, we do overspend what we're allocated for special education, and we do report that back to the Ministry of Education.
Thank you. And that's important to note that when we talk about our incidences that we report, it's not identified around special education. In fact, what we have seen in our statistics, it's basically, it's kindergarten K 3 that has been the focus of thing, and they're not necessarily a child. It doesn't say whether they're identified or not in the data that we report as a board as a whole. All right, any other questions? See no other questions for Tara. Thank you so much, Tara, for presenting on behalf of SEAC. It's always great to hear SEAC's perspective when we're going through this budgeting process.
Always. We always try and make the effort, so we know how important this is, and we really respect again, back to yes, we know how much effort is put into finding that extra funding so that we can give our students that additional leg up. Again, sameness does not equal fairness in that regard. So we want to make sure every child has the succeeds. So, but in terms of our equity and our inclusion mandates, we really are really appreciative of the efforts that the board and the budget committee does to make sure that we're trying to do our very best with the tools that we've got. Back to the comment of we get funded by the ministry, and so we have to do with what we're given. So we really do appreciate that a lot. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, moving on. The next item is questions from the previously distributed material. Does anybody have any questions around the previous distributed material? I am seeing none, and there isn't any other business, but I would like to take this opportunity to make a few comments to bring to trustees' attention. 3 comments and 1 item that is sort of an outstanding item from the previous election cycle that needs to be addressed at the board table, but may have financial implications. And again, I'm only highlighting it as an outstanding item because of the financial obligations, but it is a discussion that should be at the board table. And that was in 2018, Chief Kelly LaRocca of Mississauga, Schoolgard, Vineland First Nations wrote a letter to the DDSB requesting that the board consider an Indigenous trustee. And if my memory serves correctly, we had that discussion, and the timing of the letter was, I think, after the D&D report. I could be wrong. The board responded in writing to the Chief LaRocca that we would consider an Indigenous trustee position during the next municipal election cycle. And the decision of moving forward, whether we decide to move forward with an Indigenous trustee or not, is basically not in the purview of the Finance Committee. It's a board decision. However, the board, if the trustees do choose to move forward with an Indigenous trustee, the position would have to be included in budget deliberations, as we are not eligible to receive additional ministry funding for this position. And again, I only bring it to your attention. It's an outside item from the previous election that should be discussed at the board level. And I also want to acknowledge that the staff are going to be very busy in the next little while putting together their draft budget. We did receive the GSN technical paper late, and as usual, late last Friday. In the basically GSNs, they did previously highlight that it was approximately a 2.7% increase over the education funding from previous years. And when I reviewed quickly sort of the list of our funding that was calculated for the DDSB, and I'm only seeing, I could be wrong, staff could correct me, but I could be wrong when we get to it, but it's around 2.36% increase, and that not including any one-time or PPF funding, items such as special education increased only about 1.2%, and transportation has increased at only about 0.1%. Now, those numbers could be wrong, but that's my calculations, whatever. But those are 2 areas that were previously a strong concern to the Board of Trustees, and it appears that that's not going to change when it comes to our budget deliberations and drafting a budget. And as I said, I know staff are going to be working really hard on the next little while before our next meeting to put together a budget that meets our board's strategic priorities at this time. And that's the comments I have. Our next meeting is May 4th. And I have a motion to adjourn, please. Trustee Chair Morton, and I consider the motion adjourned. Thank you, everybody, so much for attending the finance meeting.